Hello and welcome to Ashfords Unlocking AI podcast series, focusing on the power to disrupt, how AI will change business and the law. If you're interested in finding out more, visit our AI Spotlight Hub on our website ashfords.co.uk for more AI insights. The Hub brings together commentary from our Ashfords experts, our clients and our contacts across a wide range of areas, looking at how AI might impact business and the law as its use evolves.
Hello and welcome to the latest episode in Ashford's series of podcasts entitled Ashfords Unlocking AI, focusing on the power to disrupt, how AI will change business and the law. This is part of Ashford's Unlocking AI campaign, which investigates how the law and business might be affected by artificial intelligence. If you're interested in how AI will change business and the law, visit and bookmark our Spotlight AI Hub on our website, ashfords.co.uk, for more AI insights. The Hub brings together commentary from Ashford's experts, our clients, and our contacts across a wide range of areas, looking at how AI might impact business and the law as its use evolves. My name is Brett Lambe, and I'm a senior associate in Ashford's commercial and IP team, and I also specialise in the technology sector, acting for a range of businesses who are at the forefront of innovation, creativity, and problem solving. On today's episode, I'm joined by Joe Muncaster, the head of finance of digiLab. Starting life as a spin-out from the University of Exeter, digiLab has gone from strength to strength in recent years and uses pioneering machine learning to transform the efficiency, resilience, and environmental sustainability of its customers. So, hello, Joe, and thanks for joining me today.
Hi, Brett. Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. So, I guess let's start with if you can tell us a little bit about digiLab and how it started and how it's going now and where it's going next.
Yeah. So digiLab, as you mentioned, was a spin-out from the university. It was co-founded by Tim Dobwell and also Anhad Sandhu. I should probably add doctors to the beginning of that. Very important. They spun out the company because they could see that actually there was a growing commercial need for the work that they were doing in the university. And they wanted to be able to bring these AI tools and products to an audience that was wider than the immediate research that they were doing there. So digiLab has created these products that something like twinLab that enables companies far beyond sort of your nuclear fusion reactors down to engineers to be able to take tools to be able to do AI, machine learning, model building in their environments so that they can apply that to the day-to-day work that they're doing.
Oh, fantastic. So really sort of getting a really useful tool to almost, I guess, duplicate and get lots of valuable data beyond what you're getting in real life and really just using it to expand the capability of what's there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're living in a really data-heavy world now. There's so much data out there. But there's also a lot of areas where we don't have very much data at all. So I mentioned nuclear fusion. That's one of the sectors that we work in. And actually, we haven't got a nuclear fusion reactor. So we can't use loads of existing data to be able to extrapolate what we need to know about that system. So we have to be able to build simulators and start to understand from real life data what we do know, and so how we can better understand these systems that we want to be able to build. I think also we understand as well that people of our generation, we weren't given these skills at school. Like we weren't built to be data scientists. We might be accountants, lawyers, engineers now, but we didn't learn about AI when we were at university or school. And so we need a way that we can upskill ourselves to be able to incorporate these tools into our working practices. And so Anhad and Tim have recognised that as well, and they've built something called the Academy, which essentially enables all these professional bodies, be you a data scientist or an engineer or an accountant, that you can go in, you can learn about AI, you can start to understand what the applications of it could be on your business, and you can use something like twinLab to be able to build models and demonstrate within your company how you could incorporate AI.
That's fantastic. That does sound incredibly valuable because you're right. It's the pace of change has been incredible really over the last few years alone, let alone the last sort of 20-30 years. And you're right, I think there's definitely within the workforce today, even for people at the start of their careers who, you're right, don't have that skill set, and being able to develop those later on in life is very valuable. So that's a really valuable function that you're fulfilling there. I suppose one of the things is what do you find that AI means to digiLab as a business, and how do you think it will kind of develop in terms of your use of it over the next 5 to 10 years?
Well, we are a company of mathematicians, so our team like to use machine learning rather than AI.
Yep.
There's a little bit of a differentiation.
Sure.
But essentially, we are using data that we know from test points that we've got to estimate outcomes for test points that we don't yet know. So some AI models will take data that they do know, and they'll spit you out an answer, and you have no quantification of how reliable that answer is. Our team have done this incredible thing, which is kind of their specialism, which is uncertainty quantification. So they build you a digital twin model. They will incorporate AI, so the model will learn from existing data. It will give you an answer, but it will also say, well, and this is how reliable I think this answer is. If you want this answer to be more reliable, this is where I suggest you test next. So these are the test points that I'm not entirely sure about that will help me to firm up this model and make this model a bit more resilient. So yeah, our team will kind of really help you bring that together. And I think that's, as a society, that's going to be one of these linchpins around AI. This is one of the challenges we currently have with AI. It's hard for anyone who hasn't built that model to understand what data is it using, how much of that data is it using, what are its assumptions that is pulling into that, and this answer that I get out the back end, kind of what's made that up. And that's the great thing about digiLab is trying to open the doors a bit and kind of say, do you know what, this is how reliable that is. Or if you use twinLab, we've incorporated a bit of twinLab with a learning language model recently, and it will pull information from spreadsheets, from CSV files. Yeah. But when it gives you the answer, it will say, well, do you know what, 50% of this answer has come from this spreadsheet, or 20% of the answer has come from this spreadsheet. So you get, as a user, you have a much better understanding of how has AI helped to form this final answer. And I think that gives you reassurance then. And as a society, that's kind of a bit of what we're lacking at the moment. We don't have that reassurance. When ChatGPT spits you out an answer, you don't know if it's come from Wikipedia or it's come from the Britannia Encyclopedia, or kind of, you don't have that reassurance.
Yeah, that's right. And I think you absolutely hit the nail on the head there, which is that transparency is key ultimately for building trust, because I think that's the concern that I guess wider society does have around AI or machine learning, as you rightly say, is the sort of the more technical term, because these businesses are spending so much on their R&D budgets and developing it. They don't really want to show you the workings of the machine. They don't want to open up the black box and say, here's our secret sauce. So actually, we don't know how they've got that answer. That's where the human component is still key, because you need to verify it and sort of analyze it and say, well, does it still work, and does it stress test it? So it sounds as though digiLab is very much on the sort of the more transparent and arguably a much more ethical approach in terms of helping to build trust in the quality of the results.
Yeah. And
I suppose as well, it sounds as though you're very keen to kind of prod those answers and say, well, do you know what? Is it where's it falling down? Have we interrogated it in the right way?
I think that's true, Brett. I think also we historically have looked at quite challenging areas that we've applied some of these maths to. So this AI, we've looked at areas like nuclear, like aviation, like water, where actually there's a need for your model to be quite reliable, because if you get it wrong, it's bad. Like if you get the wrong advert in your social media, okay, someone's not going to be happy and they need to tweak that, but it's not the same as getting...
Life goes on.
Yeah. It's not the same as getting kind of the size of your wing wrong on a plane. It's they're quite very different problems. So I think for us, It's been a necessity to have that uncertainty quantification, but I absolutely believe that it is almost a principal requirement that we can start to pull out over other sectors too. And I think you mentioned this reassurance and kind of where people see AI. I think one of the risks, I guess, around AI is that to date, where we as individuals kind of AI touches our lives, it is things like social media. That's where we see it.
Yeah.
And it's not always a positive.
Yes, that's it. So actually, yeah, you're right. I think it's having a distinction between AI touching all of our lives and all aspects of it, and saying, well, yes, there are the less positive aspects, but actually here are some of the big challenges it can solve over the coming decades potentially. And yeah, getting that buy-in, I guess, at a society level to have that reassurance that, you know, we can trust the technology, provided that we are still sort of, you know, testing it and stress testing it and keeping it within those guardrails.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
definitely.
that's really valuable. So what do you talk about within the business in terms of when you see, I guess, some of the more negative stories around AI and I guess the press coverage, because there's inevitably an angle, and it can be a negative and a worst case scenario. What sort of discussions are you having internally around, you know, the media portrayal and, you know, maybe steps that you can take to try to counter that?
Yeah. So when Tim and Anne had set up the company, they actually amended our articles of association because they wanted to ensure that the company could not be utilised in ways that they didn't feel were ethical. So they've amended our articles of association to dictate businesses that we can or can't do business with, that they felt quite strongly about. I think also this kind of making sure that we are ethically approaching all of our projects. So before we even kind of put ourselves out to tender for work, we have an in-house discussion that's actually, well, how are we going to manage this? What might the ethical implications be of this project? What safeguards or rails are we going to put in place to make sure that we manage that appropriately so that we can check ourselves internally against that? And we mentioned, I think, historically, kind of our touch points with AI have been really negative because they are in social media, and kind of the stories that we see in the news are negative, and the kind of scaremongering of what will AI do. But we've been living with AI for decades already. Like it's already here.
Yeah.
We just don't see 90% of it. I heard a really good YouTube video, it was a TED Talk the other day, where someone likened AI to electricity. It's something we all have, we all use electricity, but we don't think about it too much. It's what we do with electricity that is really important. We'd like to think of AI as the same. AI is something that we will use, it's a tool in the bank, we'll kind of roll it out around processes, but it's not like the product.
Yes.
AI is not the product. AI is what you do behind the scenes to make the product better.
it's a tool rather than the end product. Yeah, I think that's a really useful analogy actually, and yeah, quite a good way to think about things, to try to quell the scaremongering that can sometimes go on, and just think of it. You know what? It's out there. We've been living with it, you know, pretty harmlessly, all things considered, for quite a long time now. Yeah. And actually, it's more about sort of looking what the future holds for us.
I think, yeah, that future, like the things that we could do with AI are just incredible. The NHS, many people might admit, was on its knees at the moment, but actually there must be so many processes that we could automate, that we could speed up the processing of, that where there are low-level tasks that nurses, doctors are doing every day that is just replicating. We all probably turn up at the dentist and have to fill in the same form again. Autofill on a spreadsheet that just brings up your most recent details. Things like that, actually, they speed up the process. They just make it smoother. They're not making life-changing decisions for us, but actually they make us able to concentrate on those life-changing decisions.
Yeah.
They can say, actually, these are things I don't need to spend my time doing. This is something I do need to spend my time doing.
That's it. Focus on the higher value outcomes is definitely a good way to be approaching the problem, I would say. And I guess that's where sort of digiLab come in the sense of something like the NHS, for example. You would see, I guess it's mind-boggling the amount of data in lots of analog formats and lots of not a huge amount of interoperability or compatibility. So I guess having a way of harnessing that data and getting it in a way which actually using ML and AI to assess that and make life a lot easier, make processes smoother and more efficient is clearly a huge opportunity.
Absolutely. I think there's probably two extremes here almost. We've got at one end you could have cancer screening by machine learning, which has proven to be very effective, that could massively kind of target how and who we approach or increase the amount of screening that we can do. At the other end of the scale, we have companies like the NHS that have decades of written documents stored in a building somewhere. If we can use machine learning or AI to scan, read, process into a written data format that information, and then use a large language model to understand kind of, okay, how many people have done this, or what articles are there? There's the amount of papers that people have written over the years of research that are just in written format that we don't have on a computer. So it enables us to learn so much more and use that information. It's not just in people's heads because they did read it once 20 years ago. It's to everyone's hand now. The opportunities are significant. And I think for digiLab, we want to be able to give kind of those background easy tools to everyone. So if I'm an engineer, I can just use twinLab and that will help me to better build my bridge or understand actually how reliable is this model that I've built that says I can fit 100,000 people on the bridge at one time. And you can do that yourself, and we give you that tool and that training and off you trot, versus actually I'm a massive company, I need someone to build this specific project for me. It's a chunky meaty problem, and digiLab, the team there, they thrive on the kind of those difficult challenges. So we have those kind of two extremes, and we'd like to be able to do all the market, but it's kind of one part of it is building the products and kind of letting them fledgling and fly and helping other people to use them. The other half is actually we have these really challenging societal challenges that we want to be able to solve.
Fantastic. I know it does. It sounds like a very, very interesting place to work. I'd like to be a fly on the wall, I think, to see some of the conversations and some of the decisions that are made and how you decide what to tackle next. Really, it must be a very inspiring to-do list and some inspiring team meetings, I can imagine there. So one of the things that I was thinking about would be, what do you think as a business would be helpful to you to either from a legal framework or even at a government level to try to give you the tools and support you need to do more and to do more of what you've been doing well? Is the support there, or could it be better? And what do you think has been holding you back, if anything?
I think we've been really lucky. I know Ashfords support the Tech Southwest Accelerator Programme. Programs like that are really supportive. We've been able to be a part of that. It's open doors. We've been able to talk to a lot of people. So supportive programs like that, I think are really fantastic. It's a challenge. We see other countries, the EU, the US, have pumped an awful lot of funding into tech recently.
Yeah.
And I don't think that in the UK it's maybe been as high as priority. But there are still some really good programs out there. One of the challenges is negotiating the changes and kind of where that support is, because actually government programs change and they move on. And so keeping on top of kind of where to go for that support is always a challenge. I think from a legal point of view, as a startup, it can be expensive to get legal support. And so that's maybe one area where I guess a culmination of AI and legal technical support could be very supportive.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's right. And we're certainly seeing plenty in our industry as lawyers around the use of legal tech and what AI can do to generate, the things that would have historically taken us hours or days, it can now be done in minutes, which is interesting, sort of slightly scary in some way, but also I guess it comes back to what you were saying before, around doctors and nurses. It's a case of, do you know what, if we can do the things that were sort of quite time consuming, but ultimately not especially challenging, if that can be done super quickly by AI or machine learning and give you the result you need much more quickly, so you can focus on the really high value stuff and use your training and skills for stuff that ultimately is more valuable to a client, then that's definitely a good thing, and frees us up so that you're not chained to your desk sort of reinventing the wheel on a regular basis. So I think there's a huge potential there. But I think you're right that there are lots of programs out there that can help small business, but I think as ever there's always room to improve. There could always be more.
Absolutely. I mean, we use an accounting software that likes to suggest where you might like to put different costs, and it gets it right some of the time, but some of the time it doesn't. And it's using AI, it's machine learning, it's saying last month you put this here. So I think a great example would be, say, marketing and advertising. We have a team, they go out, they do conferences and events, and it will say, oh look, train fair. Last month you put this to marketing and events, so does it go there again? Shall I just put it there? And I'm like, oh no, that's travel, because that was so-and-so and they were traveling from work to home or something and we had to pay for that. So it can't know. It's just going off what data it has previously. And I guess that's one of the risks of machine learning, is the common phrase rubbish in, rubbish out. Kind of the data you put into it is the data that it learns from. And we saw loads of news stories around learning language models where actually it was coming out with all these biases. Well, if the information you're putting into it is biased, then that's all it's got to learn from. It's like a small child. Like, it's going to spit you out an answer that probably is biased. So I think as a society, we can't expect it to be better than us.
It's a fairly sort of common misconception, which is we almost imbue the AI with human characteristics and think, oh well, it's thinking for itself. And so, well, actually, it's not. It is still, it's software. It's analysing data, and ultimately, it can only be as good as the data that it's trained on effectively. And it's where you get the infamous hallucinations and lots of weird and wonderful things that sound plausible. It's from things like ChatGPT. There've been some real horror stories I've seen in the US around lawyers using ChatGPT, and yeah, most law firms in the UK are not permitted to have it, and they've got a policy saying that. The police say Ashfords have got a firm policy.
Well, so we have a policy too, because people might not realise, but anything you type into it is then owned by it. It's kind of like any social media. The information you put into it, it then takes the IP and the ownership of. So for us as data scientists, putting code in there then becomes kind of open source code for other people to use. So we have quite stringent discussions and rules around the office about how we utilise it. Interesting that you say that lawyers in the US are using it, because I was listening to another podcast, the Diary of a CEO with Steve Bartlett, and he was saying he'd received a letter from a lawyer and he'd essentially fed it through ChatGPT to say, is there something I should be worried about or not? Do I have to do anything? And I think it depends how risk adverse you are. I'm an accountant, so I'm pretty risk adverse.
Join the club.
The idea of doing, I was like, but you don't know what it's telling you is right. Like, why would you? And I think it really depends on how risk adverse you are. I guess what the situation is. If it's a low risk, maybe we'll see more of an increase of use of AI and the things like ChatGPT or some sort of ask a lawyer language model for things like small claims courts, where the impact is less financially significant. But I think with kind of big ticket items, whether it's people's wills or it's massive commercial property sales or even people's individual home sales, like that's probably the most expensive thing they're ever going to buy. You want to know it's been done properly.
Exactly. You want a human expert involved at somewhere in the process.
Someone has to be the checker, and ultimately it's somebody that's taking responsibility. So if things go wrong, you can pick up the phone and just go, ah. Yeah,
exactly. You've got someone you can point the finger at, as opposed to an AI which just won't care because it's an AI. I think that's absolutely right, and it's interesting that you say it's so true that you have to try to identify the the low risk areas where you can use it. I was at a Tech Southwest event a few months ago, and someone there was saying that he was just really struggling to come up with a blog post and just desperately wanted to come up with something, and just had that sort of, the fear of the blank page effectively in front of him. And he just sort of asked ChatGPT and said, "Oh, can you come up with a blog post on this topic?" And it came out with something that was perfectly plausible. So he had a good first draft, and then said, "Oh, can you make it, in a more engaging style, in the style of Harry Potter?" And it came out, and he said it was great. And he basically said he just put it out like that. So that's fine. I don't need to do anything with it. So it was done in minutes. And he said, "You know what? It saved him, half an afternoon of having to rack his brains and write something that probably wouldn't have been as engaging, but he was able to look at a first draft and say, yep, yeah, that's good."
That's interesting, isn't it? My kids went for school council recently, and we suggested to them, why don't you use ChatGPT just to do your first draft, see kind of what it says, and then maybe you could use a bit of that and like in your speech. Their first response was, well, A, that's cheating.
Yep.
And then B, what it did spit out was completely inappropriate. It had words that they didn't understand in it. Well, I was like, well, you can't use that. You clearly don't know what it means. So then my husband said, oh, write it in the style of a child. So it then wrote this in the style of a child, to which the kids were just like, oh, it's dreadful. It's so embarrassing. Like, I would never say that. I think it's definitely a tool.
But we have to treat it like a tool.
You have to treat it, absolutely. The team at digiLab, when they're building these models, they're always sense checking what's coming out the back end of this, actually. How realistic does this look? As a human, when I'm looking at this, and how comfortable am I with the answers that are coming out of it? So you always have that kind of audit check around someone who's responsible for that model and taking responsibility for what it's spitting out. And I think and we have got the AI Summit in November in the UK, I think the regulation that we start to see will probably start from that kind of back-end audit idea of how can we check how you've built this, how are you comfortable with what's coming out the end of it.
I think that's right. It's one of the really, really big challenges, because you've almost got the sort of two ends of the scale between the sort of complete transparency and the almost open source nature at one end, which is good for promoting innovation, versus the more closed model approach, which might sort of consolidate the power in the hands of a few sort of bigger tech companies. But in theory, you have more ability to control the regulation, although historically, being able to regulate some of the big tech companies has been a challenge, to say the least. But yes, I think it will be interesting to see the outcome of the AI Summit, certainly later in the month. But it's interesting what you said just a moment ago as well around your kids having that intuition around just what would come out from ChatGPT, and it's that human sense of something's not quite right. It's almost that uncanny valley that you read about in terms of where there's an AI image and something that you just sense that it's not quite human, and it's, I guess, that is reassuring for humanity, and as a species we're able to spot the flaws and think, you know what, something doesn't smell right there, and it's good that we've still got that capacity within us.
Yeah, no, I think so.
So I suppose one of the questions I was looking to come on to is whether you see any potential for collaboration with other businesses in the AI sector. I know obviously you have customers and clients who you work with on their projects, but do you anticipate working with other AI providers, or is that something that's crossed your minds, or is it something that you're sort of happy to plough your own furrow at the moment and carry on doing the success you've been doing?
In the future, we'd really love to see a wider application of uncertainty quantification. I think that reliability piece is going to be really key to a lot of people to accepting the use of machine learning and AI within model building. So I think for us, we anticipate that we will see a lot of data scientists who are maybe already doing some machine learning picking up our tools to enhance the work that they're already doing. So they can still run their models, but actually they then have this added layer of what's the uncertainty quantification? If I want to improve my model, where do I need to be testing? What raw data do I need to make this model better, so that you're not having to just go out and get loads of raw data. Actually, you can be really targeted about the raw data that you need to improve that model. as you go forward. So I think that will be our focus at digiLab when we're talking about kind of working with other AI companies, definitely. And also Professor Tim Dobble, we'll use his proper name.
Yes, absolutely.
He's actually a fellow of the Turing Institute.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So he's really involved in kind of AI and that forefront of what's happening and how we take things forward. So I expect we'll do more with organisations like that.
That's really valuable. And I think as well, it sounds as though you've got fantastic guardrails in place in terms of having a really strong, I guess, a strong identity and a strong kind of compass, if you like, around doing the right thing and actually, just doing impressive and innovative things, but always, centered around, what's the outcome and is it doing good? That's the key.
Yeah, I think it's a challenge though. I think kind of that wider review of ethics is not something that happens overnight. There are really grey areas, and we're in a period of rapid innovation and development to kind of get ourselves to net zero. And actually a lot of that is about building new infrastructure and building new products and getting to new places. And that in itself doesn't always feel very sustainable. But actually, if we can do that in a way that means we better understand it and we can better replicate those buildings, those pieces of infrastructure elsewhere, then maybe that will help society in the longer term.
A very noble and admirable aim, and I think it's a really, really positive way to draw today's episode to a close. So thank you very much, Joe, for joining us today. It's been a really, really valuable conversation. I found it really useful and very informative, and hopefully people listening have found it valuable as well. So thank you so much to you, Joe, for joining us. It's certainly been a really interesting and wide-ranging discussion with plenty of things to ponder. And for those of you listening, I hope you've found it as enjoyable and informative as I have. And I hope you'll join us for our next podcast in Ashfords Unlocking AI series. So until next time, thanks.